Call this meeting of the Speech Language Pathologists and Audiologists Advisory Board to order. First order of business is our roll call. So let me see who's here. I'm Sherry Sensibrian. Emmanuel Bodner, he's not here yet. Chevelle Bryant is not able to attend today, is that correct? Dr. Tammy Camp.
Present.
Kristen Culp.
Here.
Kim Ringer.
Here.
Elizabeth Sterling also is absent today. Michelle Tejada. Here. Thank you. And Mr. Bodner might still get here. Is that what we understand? Okay. All right, thank you. But we do have a quorum, so we'll continue. Do we have any introductions to make other than staff who will introduce themselves as they present? Anybody new, Mary, that we need to mention?
Mary Winston, I think we're kind of at the bare bones. Staff is going to make some new introductions.
Okay, that sounds good. So our next item of business is approval of the minutes from our meeting of November 15th, which feels like it was last week, but it's actually a couple of months ago now. Everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes. I didn't find any corrections needed. Did anyone else?
Move to approve.
Moved by Dr. Camp, seconded by?
Michelle Tejada.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Minutes stand. Public comment. Did we have anyone sign up for public comment today? I don't think so. Welcome, Mr. Bodner.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
There
Thank
you
you.
go. Right. So on to staff reports. And our first one's from the licensing division. I don't see Leonard in the room, so somebody else must be presenting, right?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Anthony Maldonado. I'm the team lead with the Medical Health Professions Group. So we provided you with our current licensing report with all of our numbers. I would like to provide you an update on the SRSs completed for the month of November. I know it indicates on there 241, and there was actually a total of 620. Other than that, do you have any questions?
Anyone have questions about licenses issued or renewed? Anything? Okay, Anthony.
Thank
Short and
you.
sweet. Thanks. The second report is from our customer service division and somebody who has not been in our board meetings previously, right?
That is correct. Good afternoon, board members. Thank you for your service. I'm going to bring my phone up because it has notes. I handed my device to one of our tech support to do a couple things, but this show must go on, right? So my name is Trey Seals, and I am the Director of Customer Service. Also brought my manager for the Speech Language Pathology and Audiology program, which is Tuan Nguyen, who may in the future be presenting on my behalf if for some reason I can't be here, or just for the practice of it. I'd like to share it and spread around the joy, right? So just to quickly go over the report, and then I want to talk a little bit more about what customer service does for the agency and for your industry. As you can see with email and phone calls, this particular population or industry is equally adept at both calling us and sending an email. They really love email, and we actually love that because phone calls are the most expensive interaction for the contact center. So they do typically like to reach out to us through email. Now, of course, in busy seasons like the holidays and when we take on new programs and maybe timelines are a little longer, phone calls may be what they default to if they haven't gotten a response to an email in a timely fashion. But that's something that I'll speak to on what we do, why we do it, how we do it. So in customer service, we believe that our goal and our strategy and our focus is on identifying ways to lower or reduce customer effort. So daily, we are looking at trends, we are looking at stats, we are looking at what kinds of calls are coming in, and what can we do to make this easier, make this process better? Do we need to reach out to our licensing division to change a form question? Do we need to reach out to our programming team to change something on the website, or our content team, which is in our Office of Strategic Communications, to make updates to certain FAQs, or So that is our purpose, our why. So how we do that is we do take, like I said, phone calls. We have a 50-person team, 3 managers, 5 ombudsmen or team leads, and then we do specialize in our contact center. We weren't always specialized, but at this point, with the number of programs we have, we've needed to specialize so that each group has the ability to focus on the sets of industries that they are responsible for being not subject matter experts, but knowledgeable on the program. And where our knowledge comes in is we are messengers, and we transfer information back and forth between the internal customers and divisions, employees in areas, and then the customers. So we do a lot of directing and pointing, bringing people together, communicating important information to complete an application process, or to help a licensee reconnect that email with that account in VO so that they can get online to renew. So we do a lot of training and explaining and guiding, and that's how we see our role. So we do that, again, through the phone calls and through the emails. We also have a lobby at our front desk in the E.O. Thompson building downtown. So we do occasionally have walk-ins from the speech group. But that is, in a nutshell, just wanted to give you a high-level view of
Madam Chair?
the part we play.
I'm going to just interrupt. Mary Winston. Trey has given a wonderful overview, but I liken his division as one of the many examples that we have of that duck on the water.
Yes.
And under the water, the feet are just doing this.
Yes.
And he didn't make light of, but he spoke very just in general. Yeah, these are the calls, the emails, okay. In September, emails were 1,427 emails. Calls, 1,406. Now, we have decreased, and it depends, we're getting our feet wet here and learning the system, so we have decreased those numbers. But this isn't their only program.
Right.
And Trey's division, all hail to customer service. They have boards and charts, and you can sync in and see who's on the phone. It's truly amazing, right? And we never highlighted that. I don't want to say we took it for granted. I'm not going to speak for Brian Francis, who I'm sure is watching. I would never say my boss took anything for granted. But with the advent of some of the new programs, actually Stephen Mills mentioned to me specifically, customer service does a fantastic job. Have they presented? Do they know? And light bulb moment. They really do. So we want our advisory boards to know what they do, and as Trey said, they're a bridge. They do a lot, from personal interaction to phone calls to emails and they're a bridge to the whole agency. So we want to highlight that. Also, the information is relevant because he can tell us what types of calls. They characterize the types of calls and what the issues are, and they interface with every division in the agency. So I just wanted to, this is going to be a report that we're going to see, and it'll be Trey's choosing as to which manager or ombudsman he has to present. But if you do have questions or come up with questions, these are the people that can find out what's being asked by your profession. They know, and they let us know. So,
Thank you, Mary. And to follow on that, one last thing I will say, and then I'm open to any questions. The one thing that we recently did was we implemented customer relationship management software, which is going to help us in telling that story that Mary mentions about the kinds of calls and the questions, and bring in that human element that this is what we do. We work with people, and we're helping solve problems for people. So that's what our goal is to tell that story and to share with you our successes and our challenges as we go. So I look forward to being here before you as often as you meet. And I'm open to any questions anyone has at this time.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm Kristen Kolb, audiologist. We get asked a lot of the customer service questions by our peers, I guess, because they know us. They already know our emails, and they'll
Yes.
just go right to us. And so I typically dump it on Katie probably
Sure.
more than I should. And some of them are simple questions. I mean, we can always say email customer service, but is there anyone we should be?
That would be
Okay.
Tuan Nguyen.
So, I mean, I feel helpful to my peers when I can forward their question straight to somebody. So maybe that would be helpful to have that email or number directly.
Sure.
Just because we seem to get those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will say one thing I noticed, and I leaned over and talked to Stephen about it, is that this opportunity for Katie and Tuan, and they work really closely together, but for them to have this moment to talk about, I'm having this challenge here and da-da-da, and they figured out something that they didn't know before, and I was like, Stephen, we need to probably formalize
Yeah.
that
That's good.
to happening. And we did that during the process of bringing up the programs, just to make that an ongoing thing, because there is definitely a need for Katie to get to Tuan when she needs to, and we're happy to help in any way we
could
can.
skip her if.
Sure, yeah,
She
and-
seems
and-
to answer really
absolutely.
quickly, so we keep doing it.
Not a problem.
What's the name again?
Tuan, Tuan, and then dot, and then the last name is Nguyen, Nguyen, and then if you're familiar with our domain, at tdlr.texas.gov.
And thank you, Director Trey, for giving his email to the world via YouTube.
Anyone feel free to
Twan.
email
It'll only be
Whoops.
used if it's needed,
Yes.
and that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
And Twan, you don't mind, do you? No, not at all.
There's only 1,000 or so of
That's
those SLP audiologists out there emailing, so. Sherry Cibrian. So Trey, one thing, this is the let us help you
Sure.
moment. I think it would be really helpful at some point to get a little more meat about what are the questions.
Sure.
There are some that, like you said, you're going to fix by, telling the folks in licensing, oh, if you could change this form. But if there's some trends of things that licensees need to know, I'm sure all of us do continuing ed,
Okay.
speak, we teach students.
Right.
And, we could spread the word if there are
Okay.
things that you see as
I will-
really common patterns that people just don't quite seem to get.
Understood.
If you're able to fix it internally, great, but some of it's just lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, whatever.
Thank you for that.
So, yeah, let us know, and then
Okay.
happy to teach that and say, so here's the answer to a commonly asked question.
Okay.
And
I love
Katie
that.
does all the FAQs and posts those, but if you get any others,
Mhm.
we can all check those. But other things that you think people probably need to have a better grasp of, we could
Got
do
it.
that.
Absolutely. Be sure to work through Mary and Nick and his team to communicate those needs to you. But
Maybe we can get it
absolutely.
down to like 900 emails.
It is our goal. It is our goal. So,
We'll see.
thank you.
Thank you for presenting today.
Absolutely.
I'm sure we'll be hearing from you in the
You will.
future.
You will. And if we're done?
Anyone else?
Okay.
Okay, Karen, I think it's your turn for Enforcement Division.
Bryce.
Good afternoon, board members. I'm Karen Cox. I'm the prosecutor assigned to give the enforcement staff report today. Very quick case highlights. We had 4 cases, all involving records, 3 agreed orders, and a default order entered since September 1. We opened 17 speech-language audiologist cases. In fiscal 2018, we resolved 33 cases. Obviously, some of those 33 were from the previous fiscal year. With 3 agreed orders, we assessed $5,150 in penalties and collected $1,900 in penalties. And again, that is about a 40% collection rate, which is astronomical in enforcement. So really good, guys. May I answer any questions?
Well, this is Manny Bono. What happens to the ones that do not address their fines?
Those are mostly default orders, and if they ever renew their license, they have to pay it.
I
So they can enter into a payment plan with general counsel, but until the fine is cleared, you can't renew your license.
And it's an annual license.
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
2
I was gonna say.
Any other questions for Karen? Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
The next staff report is education and examination. Annie's turn to present.
Hello, board members, presiding officer, Cyprian. I believe you have our report. First, I have some updates to our org chart on the first page. We have some vacancies that have been filled.
Would you just state your name just before we get going?
Sorry, Fanny Pringle for education examination.
Thank you.
For the vacancy that we had for the driver offender and safety education team leader position, it has since been filled by Angela Schmidt. She comes from us from DPS as a program supervisor for the handgun licensing program, and she has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Cameron University and extensive experience developing and providing instructor training. So we're real excited to have her with us. Also, the Inspector 4 position for the school inspections and site visits program. We have Amy Henson has been hired. She'll be covering the Dallas area. And she has a Master's of Criminal Justice from UT Arlington, and a Texas Civil Process Server certification. And she'll be a big asset to our division. We still do have vacancies in the program specialists, 2 program specialists 3s, and we expect to post those positions and have them filled hopefully sometime in March. The second page of our report are statistics on the jurisprudence exam completions and continuing education audits based on 10% of the licensed population up for renewal. The last time we met, you had asked me what rule changes had been made since the program transferred to TDLR that would impact the jurisprudence exam, especially pertaining to supervisor requirements, and the answer is no changes have been made. However, we did convene an exam review committee at the time of the transfer, at which time we reviewed all the rules that were in place of that transfer date and made all the appropriate updates. There are a number of proposed rule changes I believe we're going to be discussing later today. And when those proposed changes have been finalized, we will take that information internally and update the JP exam to reflect those changes, and they will be published upon the implementation effective date of those rules so that they'll be seamless. They'll just go into place right away. Later in the year, we will look into restructuring the format of the jurisprudence exams for all of our programs. We want the exam to be more interactive, to be a better educational experience, a little bit more engaging. And then once that's in place, then that's when we will have a call for subject matter experts, and we will go to individual specific exams, and we will have those SMEs come and we'll make any changes to the content as the SMEs would like to see. Any questions?
So Fanny, I think my concern last time is I would just want to make sure that all the questions that are currently being used, you can actually find a correct answer in the rules as they exist. There wouldn't be anything that would mislead someone.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and if when a candidate takes the exam, they have a link to the rules and to the different headings of each of the rule sections. And if there were ever any contradictions where they couldn't find the answer, we would get the emails and the phone calls saying, and there hasn't been any issue like that at all.
Okay, good, thanks. Any other questions about education? I'm sure somebody will get to serve on a work group related to
We hope so.
updating that after the new
That would be
rules.
great.
So, Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Staff report number 5 is from compliance.
Good afternoon. I am Katie Bryce, and I'll be giving the Compliance Division report. Our main focus since the last advisory board meeting has been assisting General Counsel with the draft rules. We also updated the applications and online content to reflect changes resulting from House Bill 4007, which the main impact on that was removing the temporary certificate of registration applications and then the references to temporary certificate of registration that appeared on the some of the intern applications and upgrade applications. Compliance staff met with representatives from TISHA Texas Speech Language Hearing Association on November 15th. The Compliance Division remains involved with the successful operation of the speech language pathology and audiology programs by assisting customer service and licensing, by reviewing transcripts and answering emails. And I would like to mention that whenever I do receive an email from an advisory board member, generally I'm the one who replies, but to get the answer, I usually rely on Twan and Anthony and their team. So I don't want to take the credit for the work that they're doing. Are there any questions about the report? Nope. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Kate.
Yes.
Couldn't let you get away. Sherry Sensibrine. I did have a question, I think that comes under compliance. Is the Compliance Division conducting random audits of supervision records as provided for in the rules? I know we're doing it for CE, but I didn't know if we were doing it for supervision records.
That's not something that we are currently doing. I don't know if that's something that maybe a standard of care work group would like to talk about, implementing that. That's something we can discuss. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and the Executive Office, Nick?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, board members, I'm Nick Boynes of TDLR. Happy New Year. Thanks for being here today, and thank you again for your service to Texas. Here to bring you our Executive Office report, which is a summary of what's been happening around the agency here recently. TDLR staff's been busy implementing legislation that was passed over the last 2 sessions. The process continues as all of our divisions have been involved in developing and reviewing rules, which you'll hear more about here in a little bit, communicating with stakeholders, appointing and prepping advisory boards when applicable, hiring additional staff, and dealing with education, exams, IT programs, and more. Majority of the work has been completed, but this process will continue as we implement programs this year and next. 2018 is a year that when we take on our statute-driven every other year strategic planning. So we'll be going through that important process again this upcoming spring, and you'll be hearing more on that as we move along. Last time you met, we were in the middle of helping our licensees and small businesses in the Texas Gulf Coast area recover from the devastation of Hurricane Harvey. We worked with the governor's office and Governor Abbott's Rebuild Texas efforts, and were successful in implementing procedures to help all of our eligible licensees in the affected areas to help them recover, return to work as quickly as possible. Our Harvey focus now is on the rebuild, and by protecting small business and consumers, avoid unlicensed activity, and ensuring that they receive quality work for their hard-earned dollars. Information on all this can be found on our website, tdlr.texas.gov, and the governor's Rebuild Texas site. But back on our website for a minute, we like to refer to our website as our window to the world. It's our chief communications tool for our stakeholders and the public, and wanted to share with you some recent web traffic over the past 6-month period. Your site had 150,908 page views, which is an average of 825 page views per day. 64% of those visitors accessed your site from a desktop computer, while 31% did so from a smartphone and 5% from a tablet. The top reasons for visiting your site, number 1, forms, followed by laws and rules, FAQs, continuing education information, and exam information. Also wanted to add that we always look at our website to try to improve it, make it more fresh, informative, user-friendly. So if you have any ideas or any thoughts, feedback, please pass it along. Also want to remind you again of our social media efforts on Facebook and Twitter, if you'd like to follow more on TDLR events and activities. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your report, Sherry Sensibrian. And now that we've finished all the staff reports, I just want to say thank you to all the staff. Our licensees don't hesitate to voice a complaint, and so it's good that I hear a lot of positive things, because I know they would also equally say the negative things. So I like that when I'm out and about and people are talking about how smoothly things are processed or how rapidly they're processed, or that they can find the answers in the FAQs. So good job, everybody. I think we're getting this all figured out, slowly but surely, right? I think our big section today is Wendy's. Work on the licensure rules, right?
Excuse me, before you start, my apologies. See, I have a question to an earlier, this is Manny Bono. I have a question to an earlier report on the customer service division. And it seems as though this is a established division who has been doing a lot of great work. But this is the first time we've heard about it at this board. So that, to me, that begs the question, are there other divisions that are doing exceptional work that we've not yet heard about?
Mary Winston, TDLR. As we grow, our learning curve, new programs, different things that we're doing, we grow in how we notify people of what we do. I think that we just were so accustomed to the great job that they were doing, we never thought about it. Stephen Mills came over during Senate Bill 202, and he had a fresh perspective from another group of licensees and professions, and he got to see the way TDLR did things that were just a little different, and maybe a lot different than what he was accustomed to, because he worked many years somewhere else. Whereas TDLR has always done it this way. It wasn't different to us, new. We were internally impressed, but again, I don't know that we thought, apparently we didn't, that it was something that should be shared until we got new blood in the person of Stephen, who mentioned it, and literally it was a light bulb moment. Why have we been hiding this light under a bushel? This is great work, and internally, we know the burden that Trey's team carries, and we rely on them for a lot. And so it is, again, I will not say my boss's shortcoming. There are no shortcomings, as I'm sure he's watching this meeting from somewhere or will watch it later. But it's growth that we finally got here. And I don't know at this moment that you're not aware of anything, but as soon as, you know, we're reevaluating constantly to grow. And as soon as we can think of something, and again, Stephen came in new, and it was something new for him, and he's like, great work, this needs to be shown. I'm like, you know what, you're right. We know it, everyone needs to know it. We'll keep an eye on that, Mr. Bodner. That's something that, as we grow, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Wendy Pello, Assistant General Counsel. This is Agenda Item F on today's agenda, and this is, you've got two rule packages. This is the large rule package we'll go first on. This is where we're amending some existing rules, adding new rules, and repealing some existing rules, and it's related to proposing rules implementing House Bill 4007 from this past legislative session, making licensing and cleanup changes, and updating the supervision provisions that are throughout the chapter. The draft you have in front of you includes the supervision changes that we discussed at our last meeting in November. Those have been rolled in The draft also includes changes that resulting from House Bill 4007, as I stated, but also licensing and other cleanup changes that TLR staff have identified since the program transferred from DSHS effective October 3rd, 2016. So as we've gotten familiar with the rules and working with them, we've identified some issues and things that we can clarify, that kind of thing. So those are included here. Those first 3 pages of the draft kind of set out the 3 categories of rule changes, and we've then identified the specific rule under each of those categories. You'll notice that there is some overlap between some rules. We'll have 2 types of changes. They'll have supervision changes, but they'll also have licensing and cleanup. So this is one of the reasons why we wanted to combine this, because there was some significant overlap on some of these. So that, like I said, those first 3 pages kind of lay out kind of where we're going and what you'll see. I have annotated and noted on the draft as we go through for each section what type of change is being proposed in that section, so you won't have to refer back. If we start on page 4 of the draft, this is the definitions. This is 111.2. These are supervision changes. We talked about these last time, but I do want to revisit a few definitions because a couple issues were raised on a few of the definitions last time, so I just want to make sure we've made the appropriate changes and it's reflecting what the advisory board was recommending. The first one ends up on page 5, and it's definition 15. This was direct supervision related to interns. Originally, it was related to speech-language pathology and audiology. It was noted last time that this didn't apply to audiology, so we have removed audiology from it. As you'll see later, the audiology intern rules talk about supervision, but they don't talk about direct and indirect because it's the audiology interns are still in school, so the supervision is done by the schools. So it doesn't specify that type. So we pulled audiology out of that definition. That very last sentence we've also changed. Previously it said direct supervision could be performed in person or via telehealth. We've made the correction based on the last meeting that the telepractice may not be used for direct supervisions for speech-language pathology interns. I'm sure we've got that correct. Okay. The next definitions are on page 6. Definition 24 and 25. This is the indirect supervision. We had suggestions for some cleanup language and just in the wording and the grammar, so we made those changes. Similarly, on definition 25, indirect supervision related to interns. Again, we've removed audiology from that definition, and telepraxis, telehealth still may be used for indirect, so that's left the same. And then on definition 28, the intern plan, last time it has been flagged as looking the same as the SRS form for assistance, and those shouldn't be the same, so we've made that adjustment, and we've removed the language that the intern may only perform activities assigned by the supervisor that are not prohibited, so we pulled that out. And then on page 7, you're not seeing it here, but we had, last draft, we had proposed a definition of supervised professional experience. In revising the rules and changing that terminology to internship, we realized we don't need a definition anymore. So that's pulled out, though you don't see it there. Is there any other comments or questions or anything else you've caught on definitions that you'd like to address? Okay. Page 7, 111.10 membership. This is a House Bill 4007 change. The bill had removed the residency requirements for advisory boards in terms of having been a resident for 2 years. So that's what the strike through under B1 is. Page 8, Rule 111.21, license examination, written examination. This again, a House Bill 4007 change. Subsections C and D are being removed because Occupations Code 4001.307 was repealed as part of that bill. Any questions, comments? 111.22 waiver written examination requirement. This we characterize as a licensing and other cleanup change. That last sentence in subsection A, that sentence is not necessary because the previous sentence already says that the waiver only applies to the written exam, and the reference to 2.23 is jurisprudence exam. It also conflicts when we get to 111.23 with the upgrade and the 12 months, so we've removed that sentence there. Any other changes or comments on that section? And please feel free to jump in at any time and interrupt. Page 9, 111.23. The license examination is jurisprudence exam. This is a licensing and other cleanup change. This, under subsection C, we're making changes to reflect what the DSH practice was, and then as it transferred to TDLR, the practice of an upgrade. That would have been the practice, but that wasn't reflected in the rules. And part of that is just moving from an intern to a full license, that you don't have to submit all of the same documents you would if you're applying maybe from an out-of-state, because you've already submitted that during the course of your licensing and moving up in your licensing status. We've made that change that they don't have to take the jurisprudence exam, or they do have to take the jurisprudence exam unless they're applying for an upgrade. And we've changed it from being 6 months to 12 months. I understand that was, I believe, TSHS's practice as well, but that's also too short of a time frame that it catches people who've had a license maybe for 9 months or ready to upgrade, but now they have to take the exam again. So that's what that cleanup is. All right, 111.30, this is a licensing cleanup change. And actually the change shows up on page 10 under B1C. This is outdated language about applications filed before January 1st, 2015, so that's been removed. And then under 2, that since the previous paragraph was deleted, deleting the cross-reference. At the bottom of page 10, there's that new paragraph 6. This is a paragraph related to transcripts that are either in English or from a foreign university. This is a provision that was in the waiver provision related to transcripts in a language other than English, so it's been relocated and expanded and put here in terms of, seems more appropriate here than in the waivers. So this is that they still have to go through, get a credentialing agency to approve that it meets the standards.
So Wendy, Shirley, and Sabrina.
Yes.
I don't know how to avoid being redundant here, but I would hope it's clear to the potential licensee that for applicants whose language is something other than English, or they went to a foreign university, that they have to do that first, and then it still has to go back to step 5, right above it, which is it still has to be approved through the CFCC.
Okay.
So you have to approve the degree first.
Okay.
And then they still went to a school that's not accredited, so they have to then send it for approval by the CFCC.
Okay, so that second sentence, the credentialing agency must determine that the applicant's degree is a master's degree or higher with a major in one of the areas of communication science disorders, but then they also, a reference that they also have to.
They should still have to do the same thing as
everybody
everybody else because they went to a college or university not accredited.
and have to go through that to see that the credit agency has approved it or that would still
Right.
qualify.
Exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't, yeah, we're not meaning to negate anything above it if, in terms of they still are going to have to meet those education requirements, and the credentialing agency is going to have to make that determination for
Because
us.
they may have earned the degree, but if they earned it 10 years ago, it may not meet current credentialing standards.
Okay. All right, so we need to somehow add a reference that they, and still somehow meet.
And then follow this transcript agency review by the CFCC.
Okay. Get that clarified. Thank you for that clarification. Anything else on that paragraph? Moving to page 11, under kind of middle of the page, subsection D, this is where we had changed supervised professional experience terminology to internship, because that's the terminology that's used throughout. You've got the intern license, and they're completing an internship, so make that consistent terminology. Updated the cross-references that are contained in that section. Any question on that? Under subsection E, the examination, we were taking out the time periods and just saying you have to pass the exam. We were thinking this is kind of an unnecessary roadblock in terms of maybe out-of-state applicants or persons who have maybe been out and taking time off and been out. So that was our rationale for removing those time periods. And that is the exam that's being referenced there is the national exam.
Can you talk just a little, Sherry Sensibre, talk a little bit more about that? I still have a concern that if you took the exam 15 years ago, it's very different content. If you've been practicing continuously in another state that has licensure, maybe it's not such a big deal, but if you stayed home for 15 years, I kind of feel like you should take the current test.
Okay. I'm bringing up Katie Bryce from our
Okay,
compliance
thanks,
division.
Katie.
Bring up our
Bring 'em in.
expert.
Generally, the people who, this is Katie Bryce, who this applies to are people who have been practicing in Kentucky or some other state, have a license there, but then they're wanting to apply here. They may not have their ASHA-Cs, so they can't fall under the waiver of the exam, and they would have to, at that point, retake the exam and do some other steps to be able to apply for a license here. We also have in the proposed draft that if the transcript is more than 10 years old, they have to show current proof of knowledge in the industry. So those people would generally also be falling under that, that rule. I don't know if there's some other clarification that
I
we could.
remember that other language somewhere later on. So just help me remember when we get to that part, one way they could show current knowledge is to take the current exam. So, I think you've got some other ways listed, some of which we'll have to talk about, but.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
So did that answer your question in terms of that change?
I think so.
In terms of that change? Thank you, Katie. All right. And so when taking out the timeframes, subsection F comes out with that. Okay, anything else? 111.35, right at the bottom of page, starts at the bottom of page 11, licensing cleanup changes. We moved to page 12, and what was B4. This was saying if you're not previously submitted, you submit, during your intern's license, you submit a coursework and clinical experience form. This provision is not applicable for full licenses. You submit that clinical work and clinical experience form only when you're applying for your intern license and only if your degree has not been conferred yet. So this wasn't an appropriate place for this, so we're removing that.
Wendy, just curious, and Sabrina, if you'd back up to number 2.
Yes.
I agree with the part that's been struck there, but you probably need to do a search in the document because it appears about 3 more times throughout this document.
Make sure we've got it
And
consistent
strike it all
throughout.
the places, yeah.
Okay, and we'll double check we've got it consistent, how we treated that. Thank you. And thank you for, sorry, I jumped over that. Up on 2, we did want to note that if not previously submitted in the intern's license, then you submit the transcript. We're trying to avoid those situations where somebody's already submitted the transcript. We have it, you don't have to resubmit it. You submitted your fingerprints and you have to resubmit them. So there's a lot of those type of clarifications throughout here, you'll notice. So thank you for pointing that out on paragraph 2. So that's a cleanup there. Moving down to what was 6, now 5. We're removing the copy of the supervisor's diploma and transcript, and this is if your internship is completed out of state. We just need the proof of the supervisor was licensed, or if that state didn't require a license, and then they had the certificate of clinical competency. So that's it, and that also makes it consistent when we get to the next page of when you're applying. So we had some disconnect there, so that's what that changes. Comments changes. Page 13, subsection C, here's another example of if not previously submitted when applying for an assistant intern license, the applicant for the speech language pathology license submits the completed fingerprints. So we've made that clarification. D2, that last part that was struck, that's where we had originally pulled out the transcripts in language other than English in getting that approval. So that's kind of where the source of that previous change was. Under what's D3 and 4, we were just separating what was originally in 3 because we had submitting required documents and required fees in one section, so we just split that out. So 3 is now required documents, 4 is the required fee. And the new subsection E, this is the upgrade provision. And as you can see, reading at this, they're doing the upgrade application, which is kind of a skinnier version of the full application because we're not asking for all the things we've already asked for before and you've provided. You can see the required documents. It's B2, 5, 7, and subsection C restricted, and then you still pay the fee for the license application. Yes. Page 14, 111.37. This is the renewal.
Just
I'm
a
sorry,
question,
yes.
I'm sorry. Excuse me, Manny Bono here. Talking about the fees, this is an additional fee. In other words, they did not pay an initial fee, so now they're being asked to pay that initial fee.
Well, they were paying this fee before. It's showing up new here
Yes.
because before, when they were applying, they would be applying for the full license, and they're still paying that fee. Now, what this is showing is the limited amount of documents and the more narrowed scope of application that they're doing. But they still paid the fee, whether they following the full license application. We're trying to make the distinction between somebody who has a Texas intern license who's just moving up the process versus an out-of-state applicant who's coming in, who hasn't had a Texas intern license, but they're applying for a full SLP license.
I guess the clarification I'm trying to find is, we're not asking anybody to pay fees on top of fees.
Yeah.
On top of fees.
Yeah.
These are new fees that are required. They're not fees on top of other fees.
No, and this is a required license application fee to apply for the full license. And so, like I said, this is just to recognize those who have a Texas intern license right now. Everybody's still paying the same fee. They're paying that fee right now.
And it's
Just-
very customer friendly because you don't have to submit the documents you already submitted a year ago.
Right.
You're going to get credit for those. So
Right.
I think people will appreciate that.
Right, right, but everyone's still applying, you're still applying for the same license, so it comes with the same license fee.
Yeah, the fee's the same.
Thank you.
No problem. Page 14, 111.37, this is the license renewal. The change you'll see here, and you'll see this in a lot of the different renewal sections later in the draft, what was C2 and the new D, this is regarding successfully passing a criminal history background check. We received questions about this in terms of people are concerned of passing the background check, did they have to resubmit their fingerprints? So this is to clarify, yes, you have to pass the background check, but you're not resubmitting your fingerprints. Once you're in the system, we get those FBI rat backs. They send us the reports if there's a change in your criminal history. So that's a clarification. I said you'll see that in future renewal sections. Any other questions? Bottom page 14, 111.40. This is the intern provision licensing. We talked about this section last time as it related to the supervision, but this is a good example of where we got supervision and we got licensing and cleanup changes all in one section. So under licensing and other cleanup, it's subsections B, D, and E. Page 15, you've got on the education, what was B1C, again, we're taking out outdated references to applications filed before January 1st, 2015. And under paragraph 2, removing that cross-reference to the paragraph above. Comments, questions on that? Page 16, the new 6, this is that same provision about the foreign degrees in the transcripts in the language other than English.
Sherry, may I ask a quick question? This is Katie Bryce. You had mentioned that you thought that you want to make it clear that people realize they need to do number 6 and number 5.
Mm-hmm.
Would it just be moving number 6 above number 5 and
wonder-
renumbering it? Would that
Yeah,
be
I wonder if
sufficient
that
for
would
you?
help.
Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the main thing, because really, number 6 is about having your transcript analyzed. The credentialing agency may be a little misleading. They're not a credentialing agency, they're a transcript analysis service. And they're just saying this course is the same as Speech and Language Disorders 101 in America. So they're not analyzing it for credentialing, in other words.
So that they definitely need both parts of it.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Relocating 6 above 5, would
Above
that change it, or
5.
do you still, we'll look at that and see if we
Yeah,
still
see
need to
if that
tie.
makes it intuitive that you have to do 6 and then you do 5 if necessary. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay, we'll take a look at that. Thank you, Katie. Okay. Subsection D, here's our proof of current knowledge. This is one you want to just flag for you. And this is where your coursework or your clinical experience is more than 10 years old. And we've added some examples of proof of current knowledge. It's not an exhaustive list, but it was helpful to give some guidance to applicants of what we're looking for.
This is Tammy Camp. As I read this, I kind of just had a couple of concerns about publishing a research paper in a peer-reviewed journal. That's great, but a lot of researchers don't practice clinically a whole lot, and so I'm not sure that that's an adequate test of somebody's clinical knowledge. and so I probably would not have that there. The other thing is letters of recommendation from current licensed speech-language pathologists. That could just be then, I can see a situation where you had somebody in the school district say, oh, we need to have this done, and so get a letter. You write this letter for this person, and whether they know that person's practice or not, I'm not sure that really establishes the adequacy of somebody's clinical knowledge.
Okay.
Sherry Sensibrian, I'd rather in place of that add, retake and pass the written exam. If you took it 15 years ago and you can pass it now, that's good up-to-date knowledge. The others, continuing ed, I think that's great. Continuous licensure from someplace else is great too.
Okay.
But maybe substituting retake the written exam for those last two.
Okay, so-
Does somebody else have a feeling about those things, Michelle?
I agree. This is Michelle Tejada. I agree with that I agree with everything that's been said.
Thank you. Okay. So we'll add retake and pass that written exam, remove publishing the peer review research paper in a peer review journal, and then having letters of recommendation. Is there anything else that you all would feel would be an appropriate method of showing proof of current knowledge? Good. All right.
Those
Thank
are
you.
good examples.
Okay, thank you. And then under subsection E, again, we've just changed supervised professional experience to internship, just clean up language there. Any other changes on that section? When we turn to page 17, this is where we've got those supervision changes we talked about last time. They got relocated, so actually we jumped to page 20. Page 20, 111.41, the intern and speech language pathology license, the internship and supervision. Again, this was supervision changes, but we did have some licensing and other cleanup changes in subsections D and G4. Before we jump to D, I just want to point out under the intern plan, under C, what was formerly C4, there was a provision about the intern only providing services for the intern supervisors who have current intern plans. That was removed. That was caught last time. It was something the assistants do, but you were saying it wasn't applicable for interns, so we've removed that. So you jump to D. You've got the internship requirements. There was a provision that's in the current rules about the internship shall begin within 4 years after the academic and clinical experience requirements have been met. That conflicts with other provisions, so that's been removed, so you're not seeing there. We had a typo under what was now the D1, about 48. D3, this is the only place we still have supervised professional experience kind of references, but it seems to make sense within the context of how this is. It doesn't seem to need a definition, unless anyone thinks it does. Okay. That's it. No other changes on that. Change to page 22. Under G, this is changes in internship, and the actual new provision is on G4 on page 23. We added this provision, and this is to assist in the licensing process. If no hours were earned under the approved supervisor, then either the licensed intern or the approved supervisor just must submit a signed written statement that no hours were earned and then provide the reason. They don't need to complete the report of completed internship. So it seemed to be a simplified way to do that and didn't hold up the licensing process. Any other comments or questions on that section?
Just back, Sherry Sensibrian, Whitney, at the top of page 22 here, and I think elsewhere it appears, we may just need to move into this century and not talk about videotapes anymore, just say videos.
Okay.
I think our young people would laugh at us.
What are you talking about? Yes. Yeah, and if you see other things we need to clean up along, please jump in and stop me. So videos there. Yeah, and maybe I'll do a word search to make sure we don't have that.
Yeah, I think it appears a couple of places. So
Okay, I'll do a word search.
find your place.
Search for that. Any other questions or comments or changes on that section? Okay, on 23, page 23, 111.43. Again, this is a new section that we talked about last time with the supervision changes. We do have licensing and other cleanup changes under subsection E. And this is to kind of standardize the SLP intern provisions in terms of continuing to practice while you're waiting your license processing, your license to be processed. Can make that standardized with the audiology interns, so it's the intern may continue to practice while awaiting the processing of their license. Previously, it had said that they may continue to practice for up to 30 days. So and I know we're processing applications very quickly, so I think that clears that up. We've also put some clarified kind of those conditions and added some conditions about what that means of practice, that you're still hold a valid intern license, you're practicing under the supervision of a current supervisor who filed the intern plan, and then you're practicing under the terms of the current plan. So it still kind of puts some constraints in there if you're practicing, but it's still under supervision while you're waiting for your full license. Other questions or comments? 111.45. This is a licensing other cleanup change. When you get to B2, we've clarified that for B2, this is what you submit if the graduate degree has been conferred. And then to clean up, and then under what's B4, this is if the graduate degree has not been conferred. We realized under 4 and what was 5, twice it was asking for the coursework and clinical experience form, even though it doesn't say coursework and clinical experience form in the language that was struck under 4. That's what that was, is the verification. Go ahead.
This is Katie Bryce. Anthony in licensing just made a suggestion on 24.4, which I know we haven't quite gotten to that one yet, but it relates to the coursework and clinical experience form. Right now, what it says in the rules is that if the degree has not been conferred, you have to submit a copy of a transcript and the coursework and clinical experience form. And then a few weeks later, typically, we get another transcript with the degree conferred. So he's suggesting that number 4 says if the graduate degree has not been conferred, the coursework and clinical experience form completed and not require the transcript that hasn't had the degree conferred, because basically that's what the coursework and clinical experience form is attesting to, is that you've completed the coursework.
Sure, sensory, and that would be such a nice thing, because students have to pay for those generally, especially if they get them later. So if they get it once, that's great, but it is very silly to get it and then 2 weeks later get it again. So, because they want to apply for their license immediately, and we finished classes, the commencement may not be for 2 weeks, and so there's a period there where they couldn't provide a transcript showing the degree, but 3 weeks later they could. So that would be great.
Thanks, Anthony. I don't know if you want to make that suggestion to just strike that.
Yeah.
Wendy, thank you.
Thanks, Katie. So under 4, then we could strike if the graduate degree has not been conferred, immediately jump to submitting the coursework and clinical experience form completed by the user program, and strike the original or certified copy of the transcript.
Right.
And then when you get to page 25.5, we're striking this because this was actually requiring everybody to fill out that clinical work and clinical experience form, even if you have the degree. So we're striking that. We've already incorporated that up into 4 with if you haven't had the degree conferred. So this was a cleanup, a licensing cleanup.
And now the program directors will thank you. So I don't need to fill out a form when their transcript shows that they have the degree.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. So, like I said, we've been working with these rules and working the program and kind of realized where we've got some redundancies or things that were in here that look like they apply to everybody. They only apply in certain situations. So we've tried to make those clarifications. So that's what the big part of the licensing and other cleanup means. Cleanup just language on paragraph 4 in terms of removing that department-approved supervisor. And just being supervisor, we've made that clear elsewhere. And then under subsection C, again, this is with the fingerprints and clarifying, if you've already submitted those. Any other questions or comments on that section? Still page 25, 111.47. Again, this is the renewal, and we've got the same cleanup here about the criminal history, background checks, and the clarification about passing. comments. Page 26, 111.50. Again, we had talked about this one, about all the supervision changes. We also have some licensing and other cleanup changes to subsections A, B, C, and E. Under subsection A, the actual change shows up at the top of page 27.
Wendy?
Yes.
I'm sure since you're
Back
ready, if
up.
you'll hold up. In number 2 at the bottom of page 26?
Yes.
I think it will help to be more consistent if those are referred to as semester credit hours as they are later in the document.
Okay.
It's 3 times in 2 and then in the A and B under it.
So it
Just
should
put
be semester credit hours.
hours, because later in the document, that's what we call them, and that's what everybody calls them.
Okay, yeah, we definitely want to make consistent that somebody thinks we're talking about something different. Okay, thank you. Make those changes, and we'll make sure we catch that everywhere that shows up. Okay, so the change we've made is showing up as D and E. D originally had talking about the 24 semester hours excludes the clinical experience and the coursework with the special education, deaf education, and sign language. I think there was confusion about what the references to special education, deaf education, sign language, did that go to clinical experience or just coursework? So we've just clarified. So D is just now talking about excluding coursework, such as special education, deaf education, or sign language. And the new E is the 24 semester hours must be lecture-based and excludes clinical experience.
Sherry Cibrian, I think you might just think about a different modifier for coursework.
Okay.
Didactic or academic, something, because we have a lot of coursework that's not really a lecture, and people who are very literal are going to go, oh, that's not a lecture course. It's
Okay.
a hands-on course, even though it's not clinical practicum.
Okay.
So didactic, academic, some other word I think will help.
Okay. I mean, does it help to have must be academic coursework excludes clinical experience, or does it just say, would it be clear 24 semester hours must be, or the 24 semester hours excludes clinical experience? Just, I think we were trying to make sure that the clinic wasn't course, and that is weird.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Make sure
So
we're really clear.
their enrollment, I think it's okay if you
You
just
just
change
say
that one word.
from
Because they
lecture-based,
might,
okay.
yeah, undergrad programs don't always include actual clinical experience. That varies from school to school, but if they did, it would be good for them to understand not to count those hours.
Okay, okay. So we'll make your change in terms of lecture-based to maybe academic.
Wendy, this
Yes.
is Kristen Culp. Many times in the document, when you print a number, you also put the number in
Mhm.
parentheses. And 3 of 24 semester hours is not that way? Is that something that should always be the same?
We can make, yeah, make
I
that
mean, to
consistent.
me, when people are looking for those kind of rules, it's really easy when they see numbers to
See numbers.
pull it out. But
So we've got
I
that
see
back.
it so many times, and that one was not done.
Yeah, and we've got it on B
New
and
ones do
C.
help people see them.
Silly, but it's consistent.
It helps.
Yeah, no, we definitely make it user-friendly. Yeah, so we can change that B and C.
Yeah, B and C.
Are there any other changes on that? Under 3, this is page 27, the paragraph 3. There's the part that we struck at the end, that they're doing their 25 hours of clinical observation and assisting experience, either it's obtained with either an educational institution or one of the cooperating programs. That last part, under direct supervision, place of employment, we're striking that. I think there's some confusion that people are starting to work before they finish their clinical experience. The other thing is that conflicts with the statute, because the statute says it must be in the education institution or cooperating programs, but it doesn't have that workplace or place of employment.
Sherry Cibrian, I think no matter what you do or don't do there, you're still going to get a little bit of confusion. It's true that they will eventually qualify because they'll have to do the clinical deficiency plan, but that kind of doesn't follow immediately. And so I think that's going to be a little scary to people to read that if I didn't get those 25 hours while I'm at the university, I don't qualify. So some way to maybe say, yes, but there is a way you can still qualify for this license. So Katie, I'm sure you deal with it.
So you're suggesting maybe just, sorry, this is Katie Bryce, adding a sentence saying if the 25 hours of clinical observation and 25 hours of clinical assisting experience were not obtained in an educational institution or one of its cooperating programs, the assistant must complete a clinical deficiency plan under, and then put the rule
Which
citation.
is actually on the next page in section E. I just think maybe we need to direct them just because it's farther apart. Or a very short reference to must complete a deficiency plan as per section E, you know.
As per section, yeah.
Something just to alert them, we do have another path for you.
Right. It just, if somebody just reads this and they don't go on to read the rest, they think that they can go ahead and start the hours
Absolutely,
as
yeah.
soon as they want to, and as soon as they get hired, instead of waiting until they get
I think
licensed.
that's
So,
good and important. So as long as we get them to the right piece that says, here's how you have to do it if you didn't get these hours.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, so we'll put a link there, and add a sentence there about it. If they haven't completed
Some
that,
reference to that.
they must complete a deficiency plan and then get them directed to the appropriate cross-reference. Okay. What's the new B2? Again, this is another place where we have proof of current knowledge. I'm assuming we'd want the same changes made previously here, or is there a difference of, I think these are the same.
This is Tammy Camp. The assistant wouldn't have the examination ability, so that because they don't qualify to take an exam, and so yes, I agree. It shouldn't be a peer-reviewed journal or letter of recommendation, but it also won't include
Be
the
the exam.
examination.
Okay.
And they also can't hold ASHA certification, at least currently. There is
Okay.
no certification for assistants, so.
So for assistants, we'll have recently completing continuing education of other courses or holding a current license in another state.
I think
That would be
that's
the only
about it.
options for.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Make that change. And then under C, this is when you've got your bachelor's degree in a major that's not communicative sciences. There's a way to do a case-by-case evaluation of the transcript. So we've included the cross-reference back up to the meeting the requirements under 50B2, which is the paragraph above. Proof of current knowledge. Other changes on that. Subsection E on page 28. We have some license cleanup changes. We also have supervision changes. I want to talk about the supervision changes. This had come up last time related to paragraphs E4 and E6, and we're trying to replace the 100% direct in-person supervision. And came away with that was we need to be really clear that all of those hours must be completed in person and direct supervision. So what we've done is add in the main paragraph of E, we've added a sentence right there in the middle. All hours must be completed under in-person direct supervision. We've also put it down under E4, right, starts right at the bottom. It's about the statement that's being provided. They successfully completed their clinical observation and clinical assisting experience, and that all hours worked by the licensed assistant were under in-person direct supervision. And then under E6, again, you see where we struck the 100% direct supervision. We have in-person direct supervision, but we've also added a sentence at the end of that paragraph, at all hours.
Hopefully that'll get their attention. That-
Okay.
That's good.
Right. We said it 3 times, everyone got that, So I just wanted to, that was from our last meeting, so I just want to point that we've made those changes. Going back on page 28, E4, this is about completing the clinical deficiency plan, and that they're submitting what they're submitting to the department. We were striking A and B in terms of that wouldn't be necessary to submit to the department. I mean, if we need it, we can request it, but we don't need the supervision log and the rating scale when coming in. So we were striking that, leaving the statement along, adding language about the statement being all hours completed in person direct supervision. Any other changes on that? We ended up on 29, and this is, again, supervision changes that we relocated, so we jumped to page 36. This is this assistant speech language pathology license supervision. These were supervision changes, but I do want to go and discuss G3. We had some changes from the last meeting about the working less than 4 weeks in a calendar month. So G3 ends up on page 37. And if fewer than 4 weeks are worked in a calendar month, then the number of hours of supervision provided will be based on the number of weeks worked. 2 hours of supervision must be provided for each week worked, including 1 hour of direct supervision, 1 hour of indirect supervision. Did we accurately get that? Okay. Yeah. Did anyone have any other changes or a second look at these supervision changes? Okay. If nothing else, that was the only thing I wanted to highlight, going back on the supervision. So we jump to page 39. So the assistant speech language pathology license, the practice and duties, again, supervision changes. We discussed last meeting. I just wanted to open this up if anybody had any comments, questions, changes, seeing it a second time. If not, then we'd go to page 42, which would be section 111.55. It's the assistant speech language pathology license, the application eligibility requirements. These are licensing and other cleanup changes under B2. Because we have now added a definition of the supervisory responsibility statement, we don't need most of that language because that is the definition of what a supervisory responsibility statement is. Under B3, we've tried to clarify and correct the language. We're just clarifying that the transcript showing the 24 semester hours that are required, and that showing the applicant possesses a baccalaureate degree. We're making sure it matches the rest of the rules in the statute, if that's the baccalaureate degree in communicative sciences or disorders, or the baccalaureate degree that qualifies under section 111.50C, and that's the alternative. You don't have a degree in communicative sciences, but it's the case-by-case examination.
And that's just another place if you'll just do a find and replace semester hours to become
Semester hours.
semester credit hours. Yeah.
Question.
Yes.
Manny Bono here. Is there a definition for IEP? Or could you
For
explain
what?
what IEP means? Individual Education Plan, under C2, page 39, the bottom of page 39.
Page 39.
Sherry, do you want to answer that?
IEP actually is the individualized education program. So we don't exactly have the right words, but it's used in the public school it's kind of like a treatment plan would be in a medical setting, but it's the plan of care, what you're going to be doing. So this just clarifies that the supervisor has to develop that plan, and they have to do that in any setting, but this is specific to schools.
Is this something we need a definition for, or are we okay? Okay.
I don't know if you do or not. You might consider it. But again, that's your call.
Leave it to our
I guess those in
professionals,
the
is that,
profession
and that's just
know.
understood.
Right.
Those out of the professions don't know.
Right.
So if this is a document for everyone, then maybe a definition would be appropriate. But again, it's a judgment call.
I don't know if we've had any confusion or concern, because this would be the supervisor providing, in terms of both of those are going to be licensed individuals, as opposed to other provisions that may be directed more toward the consumer or the clients.
I think it's a common enough term for the
Okay.
people that it affects that it's okay.
Okay. Thank you. Back on page 42, those were the only changes. I didn't know if anybody had any other comments on 111.55. Page 43, 111.57. Again, this is a renewal provision, so we are under what was C2 and the new D, cleaning up and clarifying the criminal history background checks. And what C was now C4 is just the cleanup language, removing that department-approved language. Comments, questions on that? Okay, page 44, the entire subchapter G, which includes sections 111.60, .65, and .66, have all been repealed. These are the temporary certificate of registration of speech language pathologists provisions that was repealed by House Bill 4007. So we get to jump to page 48.
And Wendy?
Yes.
Switching to audiology seems like a really good time to ask that we take a short break before we move on to the new topic.
Sounds
I
good.
don't like for people to have to sit still. So let's take a 10-minute break and resume with audiology.
Thank you.
talking to him.
I just shocked at how expensive rents are over there.
I'd like to call the meeting of the Speech Pathology and Audiology Advisory Board back to order. Thank you for the break. And Wendy's going to continue starting on page 48 with our rule updates.
Thank you. Wendy Paulo, Assistant General Counsel. Page 48, 111.70, the audiology license, the licensing requirements. We had some licensing and other cleanup changes. The new subsection D, again, this is the transcript in language other than English or degree from a foreign university. Is there any changes to that? And then with under subsection E, the examination, again, we removed the 10-year time restriction on that. Changes, comments on that section. 111.75, the audio license application eligibility requirements. We have licensing, other cleanup changes. Under B2, again, if not previously submitted when applying for your intern license, you submit your original or certified copy of your transcript.
Wendy, I'm
yes.
sure since they were in something
Yes.
that you didn't change, but I didn't catch previously. In number 3, top of page 49, that's the wrong council. It would be the Council for Clinical Certification. It refers to the Council on Academic Accreditation, and that's the wrong council.
Is it still ASHA?
Yes, it's still ASHA, but it
ASHA.
would be Council for Clinical Certification.
Council for Clinical.
That's the only place I caught it. We have CFCC and the other places, I think, but that's another one of those, probably wouldn't hurt to search, because there wouldn't be any reason for the CAA to appear in this document.
Okay, so CA should
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 never
not show
appear.
up in here.
It should always, if it mentions council, it should always be the other one.
Okay, and it's the Council for
Council
Clinical
for Clinical Certification.
Certification.
This is the one that accredits universities and
Okay.
says you're doing an okay job.
Okay.
And this is Michelle Tejada. Should we clarify what ABA stands for, American Board of Audiology?
And we have it in the definitions.
Okay.
ABA, the American Board of Audiology. Okay, so we'll making a note here that the CAA should not show up anywhere in the document, and it should be replaced, where if it does show up, it should be replaced with the Council for Clinical Certification.
Correct.
Okay, we'll search everywhere on that. Okay. The paragraph 4 that's struck, again, this is a provision that's not applicable for a full license and only applicable for an intern license and only applicable if the degree has not been conferred. The new 4, previously 5, is cleanup, just clarifying it's a Texas intern audiology license. What's now the new 5, again, this is with the out-of-state internship. We do not need the supervisor's diploma or transcript. We just need their proof of their license or their certificate of clinical competence. And then C at the bottom of the page, again, clarifying the submission of the fingerprints, if not previously submitted. Any other changes or comments on that page?
Sure, since you're bringing, Wendy, in 5B, audiologists, speak up here. It says if they don't have licensure, they would need a letter from ASHA showing CCC. Do we need to mention ABA certification? Is there something that we would be looking for? I don't know it well enough. Not really. Anybody?
Michelle, do you know? Instead of, you mean?
Well, because we refer to it, look up in number 3, it mentions ABA certification, so I'm wondering,
I
are
think it would
we allowing
sense.
that? I mean, it wouldn't hurt to have both in there, certification
I would think so too.
by ASHA or, again, I don't know enough to be sure, but
And from the ABA, is it a certain certification, what would they be getting?
Board certification.
And that'd be it.
Or, so certificate of clinical competence or ABA certification.
Or ABA certification.
Certificate of, or,
That's why I just want to clear if there is the what
I have it, but I don't even know.
what it's called.
We
Make
may
sure
have to look up
we don't
the
go-
exact name of the credential to be sure
Yeah.
we've got it right, so.
Okay. Okay, we'll make that change there. Any other changes or comments on that page? Page 50, under subsection D, again, when you see D2, this is the language that's being struck is about the transcript in language other than English being relocated and expanded. D3 and 4, we're just separating the documents, the required documents and the required fees into two separate items. 3 is now just documents, 4 is the fees. E is reflecting the upgrade in the intern, from the intern license to the full license. Again, just as it was for SLP full license, the upgrade. They don't have to submit as many documents. You're still submitting the same initial application fee.
This is Katie Bryce. I wanted to point out on page 50, on D at the top, it does refer to the ABA certification. So I'm guessing that's what the
So it would
correct
make sense we
term
would
is.
have it for
Yes.
the supervisor as well, yeah. So just maybe the same wording in both places would work fine.
Thank you, Katie. Okay. Page 50, 111.77 renewals. The changes are actually on page 51, and these are the same changes that you've seen previously on renewals about clarifying the criminal history requirements. Comments, changes. Still page 51, 111.80, the intern audiology license. The education requirements, again, we saw this, these changes last time on supervision. Subsection B is a licensing and cleanup change. This actually came up during our standard care work group, that maybe the language under B, that the doctoral degree should be obtained versus completed. Though I do note, back up on the full license, it still says completed, so we just maybe need to pick a word and be consistent in terms of. So I guess my question was, did the advisory board want to change that from completed to obtained? And if so, then need to make the, I don't know if that has a different meaning to anybody.
I'm sure since the only thing I wonder is, this is an application for an intern's degree, and so it's not really true that they've completed the degree at the time they're applying for an intern. They're still a student, so maybe obtained is a better word, because it doesn't at least
Shall
have the
be
connotation.
obtained, so being future, okay. So is it still appropriate then for the full license because you have completed it for that distinction?
Completed would be
Okay.
appropriate there.
Okay.
Mhm.
Makes sense. Okay. And that was the only licensing cleanup change on point 80. The rest of it, when you turn the page on 52, is the supervision changes that got relocated, which makes us jump to page 54. Page 54, section 111.81, the intern audiology license, the internship and supervision requirements. These are mostly, again, supervision changes that we saw last meeting. There's licensing cleanup under E4. Before we jump there, again, this is a place under C. Last draft had what was a C4 regarding the intern only providing services for intern supervisors who have a current intern plan. Again, that was an assistant provision that shouldn't be included in the intern provision, so we removed that. You're not seeing them. If you get to E4 on page 55, again, we put in a parallel provision about not having to fill out the report of completed internship, just provide a statement if no hours were earned with the supervisor. Any other changes? Okay. Moving on to page 56, 111.82, the intern audiology license practice and duties. We discussed this is last meeting, we didn't make any other types of changes here. I didn't know if anyone had any comments, questions, changes. And as you can see under C, now this provision about the audiology interns is parallel with the SLP interns in terms of continuing practice while you're waiting for your license to be processed, application to be processed. 111.85, intern audiology, the application eligibility requirements. These are licensing and cleanup changes that show up. I'd let Kitty jump in here.
This is Katie Bryce. I just wanted to make the same suggestion that we did under the speech-language pathology section for interns, that to strike the language in 2, requiring the original or certified copy of the transcript, since they're already submitting the coursework and clinical experience form. Just if y'all agree with that or not.
Thank you, Katie. And that, yeah, and it's the audiology interns, they're still in school, so that wouldn't be relevant.
Makes sense.
Okay, so that change that Katie was talking about is the top of page 57, and that's B2, so we'll strike the original certified copy of the current transcript. Paragraph 4 is just cleanup language. Paragraph C, again, clarifying the fingerprint requirements. Other changes or comments in that section? Still on page 57, 111.87, intern and audiology license, the renewals. C2, again, and C2 and what's D on the next page, again, clarifying that criminal history background check. What was C3 about submitting the evaluation of the intern's progress or performance? Again, we didn't feel like that needed to be submitted. I'm not sure we're doing anything with that or necessary.
Ms. Sherry, since I don't have a strong feeling either way, but we need to be consistent. So it was not struck in the speech section back on page 25 at the bottom of the page. So if we're going to strike it in one, we should strike it in both. Bottom of page 25,
catch.
number 4.
Good catch. I don't know. The compliance really has
Is there a reason why we want it for either? So strike it back
So
on
back
page
on
25.
page 25, right at the bottom, submit evaluation, we will strike that. What's 111.47C, it's now the new 4, will actually
Right.
come out.
Right.
Okay, thank you for that catch. Back on page 57, 111.87, that was the change we were pulling off the evaluation, and the rest are criminal history, background check clarifications. Page 58, 111.90, assistant audiology license, this is their education and training. The entire section is supervision changes, which so we talked about last time, but we do have a licensing cleanup change under subsection B. B3, this relates to the change in the assistant audiology going from a bachelor's degree. Now they're allowed to have the high school diploma or equivalent, and now if they go that route, they have the Council for Accreditation and Occupational Hearing Conservation training in that exam. However, if they hold the bachelor's degree or higher, we were saying that the applicant didn't have to complete that training. That makes sense. So that's what B3 is. So
So
like-
Wendy, sorry, just
Absolutely.
as long as we all understand you're not, and nobody's going to have a bachelor's degree in audiology.
Right, and it's
So
bachelor's degree or higher in audiology or related hearing science, I think.
they're not going to have one in hearing science, so those things don't exist. So
Okay.
it should be the
Just a-
same communication disorders or whatever we have back for like assistance in speech pathology. That terminology should be consistent and used here. It's that kind of degree. Usually we said something like a bachelor's degree in communicative sciences and disorders. So something pretty broad.
Even though this is on the audiology side.
Right, because it's the same undergrad program, no matter whether you're ultimately going to be doing speech or audiology. There are no audiology-specific undergrad programs.
So you're saying bachelor's degree in communicative science?
Sciences and disorders, I think that's how
Just
we
kind of
have
use
it
that
back
par-
under
that
the
language.
system. But that, whatever that language was, just use the same.
Okay, I'll make that change. Thank you. Page 59, again, the new 4, submitting the SRS form, we were able to delete what was 4A because that we now have a definition of SRS form. What was 4B is actually now relocated to paragraph 5. The one change we did make in that, originally it said the practice may only be under the direct supervision of the supervisor. We had added only under the in-person direct supervision. Is that correct? That it's in person?
I think so, right?
Okay.
I don't think we're going to allow tele for that, no.
For that,
Right,
and
yeah,
that,
okay.
and that goes to that 25 hours, so we want to make sure we were
Right.
catching it elsewhere. So that's where we added the in-person there. C, we're talking about completing the job-specific competency-based training. We just added the cross-reference to subsection B5 above, just this is the training we're talking about. And then the rest is cleanup and updating the cross-references. Other changes on that section. D on is relocated supervision changes, so we jump to page 65. This is the 111.91 assistant audiology license supervision requirements. We had talked about this section last time, but I wanted just to revisit subsection F3. Again, this is the, we talked about this as the supervision or mountain type of supervision with fewer than four weeks being worked. So we have the same language in both places, though that the hours have been adjusted according because the audiology hours are for the number for total for the calendar month is 40. And it's 10 per week. Any other comments, changes, or okay? Otherwise, this is the rules that we had last time, so we can jump to page 68. (111.92) the assistant audiology license, the practice and duties, the assistants. Again, this was only supervision changes we talked about last meeting, but wanted to give you an opportunity if you had any comments, questions, additional changes after a second review. Okay, we can jump to page 71. Page 71, section 111.95, assistant audiology license, the application eligibility requirements. We do have licensing and other cleanup changes here. B2, again, we've added the definition of SRS forms, so we don't need all of that text under B2. Under B6, again, this is where we had the bachelor's degree, but we need to make the same change here. Regarding the any other changes on that page? And again, we're here under C. We didn't make any changes if previously submitted because the assistant would be coming in originally said they shouldn't have had fingerprints submitted. So there's not that language you've seen in some of the other provisions if previously submitted. Page 72, section 111.97, assistant audiology license, the renewals, licensing and cleanup changes. What was C2 and the new D? Again, these are the clarifying criminal history requirements. C4 is just cleanup language. Reference department approved. Anything else on that? Bottom of page 72, the entire subchapter K is being repealed, and that includes sections 111.100, .105, and .106. And that's due to House Bill 4007 repealing the temporary certificates of registration, which means we jump to page 75. .111.115, the dual license. Cleanup under subsection C, clarifying the fingerprint requirements. And we hear you may have, depending on if you already have a full license, you have a full audiology license, but you're going to do dual by getting the speech language pathology, you may already have a full license. You also could be coming up being an assistant or intern, so recognize that you may have submitted your fingerprints for any one of those license types. Comments on that? Hey.
Just curiosity,
Yes.
Manny Bodner here. In Texas or across the nation, are there a number of speech pathologists and audiologists with dual licenses? Is this a fairly common thing?
That I don't know. I don't know if you're on the board or Katie or in licensing knows.
It was much more common 30 years ago, but it is not common now. I think we have a few folks maybe who are still holding dual licenses, but the fields have become so different with so much information that it doesn't really make sense anymore, but we still have a few people. So
Thank you.
it's a handful.
No changes or comments on that section? Page 76, 111.117, again, the dual license, and this is the cleanup of the criminal history requirements. Section, bottom of page 76, section 111.140 rules. This is the licensing cleanup. Under Texas Occupations Code 51.2031, this is a specific section about rules related to health programs. It's named 6 health-related programs, and speech language pathology and audiology is one of those. And this relates to standard care scope of practice rules. We've developed and adopted, and the Commission's adopted rules. So at the time when we were going through this process, these rules preceded the Chapter 100, so we kind of put in placeholder language, and now we have final rules, so we've put that reference in there instead. Page 77, 111.151, the Consumer Information Display of License. Subsection C is coming out because of House Bill 4007 repealing the temporary certificate of registration. Section 111.154, requirements and responsibilities of supervisors and persons being supervised. Again, this is all supervision changes. We discussed at the last meeting, but wanted to give you an opportunity in case you had any comments, questions, changes based on a second review. Okay. Which means we jump to page 79. Fees, this is 111.160. Subsection B is being amended, and it includes the upgrade of the intern, just to have that clarification. Clean up there. Subsection E, former section E is being repealed. That's the temporary certificate of registration for SLPs. What's now subsection E, formerly F, includes the upgrade from the intern license for audiology. And then on page 80, what was subsection I repeals the temporary certificate of registration for audiology based on House Bill 4007. Questions or comments? Page 81, 111.171, complaints regarding standard of care. Again, this is an update to the removing placeholder language and putting in the specific adopted rules. 111.180, we've got some cleanup changes. We also have just some wordsmithing as applicable. One of the things that House Bill 4007 did was remove redundant provisions that were our Chapter 51, our Occupations Code Chapter 51 governs all of our programs. So we already have administrative penalties, administrative sanctions, those type of revisions in Chapter 51. House Bill 4007 took out the specific administrative penalty section for out of the speech language pathology and audiology chapter because Chapter 51 applies. So you still have administrative penalties, but that's just kind of a cleanup of as applicable where it's whichever chapter it's falling in. 111.200, the registration of audiologists and interns, again, removing the reference to the temporary audiology certificate due to House Bill 4007. 111.213, this is the limitations on the use of telecommunication technology by speech language pathologists. These were strictly supervision changes. I didn't know if you had any comments, questions, changes. And then on page 82, 111.216, limitations on the use of telecommunications technology by audiologists. This was a new provision. We had it in our supervision changes last time. We did want to bring it back here. One of the things we did change, and this is, we try and make it consistent and the same, except for when it can't be. In the last draft, we had a subsection C that addressed audiology interns. And again, as we discussed earlier, the audiology intern provisions don't have discussion about direct and indirect. So we had a provision in there that said direct supervision of a licensed audiology intern shall not be undertaken through telecommunication technology. So we've removed that provision. You're trying to make it parallel with 213 in terms of speech-language pathologists having assistants and interns, but in this situation with audiologies, the intern provision doesn't apply. So we removed that. So I just want to make note of that. Any other questions or comments? Great. That. Just the review of that rule chapter. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Next steps, we would be publishing the proposed rules. We would actually get a recommendation from the advisory board of publishing the proposed rules with the changes that we've discussed today, publishing those in the Texas Register for public comment. So open that up for your discussion or further comments or anything else on the draft.
I think these are minor cleanups, and you can easily, it's wordsmithing or substituting words, so I'd love to get them out in the register as quickly as you can make those changes.
Okay. Right.
Everybody else feel agreed?
Okay. So we can just get I guess like a vote on a recommendation
Yes.
to publish
So
the
all
proposed
in
rules with the
favor
changes.
of publishing the rules with the changes as discussed today?
Is there a motion?
Oh, someone needs to make a motion before
This
we
is Tammy
vote.
Camp. I make a motion that we approve the changes as we've discussed today for the rules.
Seconded by Kristen Culp. So now, all in favor of publishing these rules as with the changes discussed in our meeting today?
Aye.
Aye. Great, motion carries. So
Thank you.
thanks for all that work,
Yeah.
Wendy.
Yeah,
That is a
thank
ton of work.
Yeah, well, thank you to everybody involved,
good
advisory
group.
board and all the staff as well. It was definitely a group effort on this.
I'll be excited to see the cleaned up version. I think it's just going to be easier to read.
That's definitely one of our goals, is to make this very user-friendly and be able to find the information you're needing. So, yeah, our goal is to submit this to the Texas Register by the deadline on January 12th, and it would show up in Friday the 26th, January
great.
26th, Texas Register, so, for a 30-day public comment period. So that finishes that rule chapter.
Okay. And we also have item G on the agenda, and I bet that's yours too.
That's me too.
Okay.
Wendy Paulo, Assistant General Counsel. This is much shorter rule section. Again, we had discussed this at our last meeting and had a previous presentation 2 meetings ago, just kind of preparation of kind of the trends we were seeing, the changes. And we brought, and just to clarify, so this is agenda item G, discussion and possible recommendation regarding proposed changes on the rule under 16 Texas Administrative Code 111.212H related to the use of telehealth by speech-language pathologists and requiring in-person initial contact with clients. We brought 2 options last time to the board. We had those discussions, and we've went back and had internal discussions about some of the language that was discussed, and so we're coming back with 2 options. If you look at the bottom of page 1, what's option 1 now was previously option 2 in the last draft. The client at the initial contact with the client may be at the same physical location or through telepractice as determined appropriate by the licensed speech-language pathologist. And then the second option, which shows up on top of page 2, kind of incorporates some of the direction of the advice board members wanting to kind of retain that assessment kind of criteria, but not have that tied to the initial contact. And so that option 2 shows up as H and H1, which you still have the same language in H, but now under H1 you have a provision that says a provider shall consider relevant factors, including the client's behavioral, physical, and cognitive abilities in determining the appropriateness of providing service via telehealth telepractice. So now, open that up for your discussion. We had, just know, there had been discussion at the last meeting about based on available records. That was not approved. We thought that was too restrictive because there may be what's available, what's a record. You might have other information. We didn't want to limit the professional in terms of the resources and the information you had to you. So that, we didn't propose an option like that to you all, but open that up for your all's discussion.
So thoughts? Sharice and Cyprian, I appreciate you in option 2, keeping in the description of the factors that need to be considered. I think that's just a good reminder that delivering services by telehealth may not be appropriate for everyone, and you should know that if you're a practitioner, but it never hurts to make that more clear. So I like having that spelled out as H1. Anybody else?
I agree, Kristen Cole. I think that's clear. Helpful.
Okay. Any other thoughts about that? They're the same, except just the difference of adding that description of what you should consider. So I think it's helpful to have it there.
Right, and it's not tied to initial contact. That's something that may be something that changes with the client in terms of may be appropriate at first, but not later, or not at first, but maybe later. So it's continuing
The fact
evaluation.
that you mentioned that it's not tied to the initial contact, that was the only thing that I questioned, was whether making it H1 makes it seem like it's tied to the initial contact, if it would be more powerful if it were just another standalone bullet, because it's actually really similar to things like only use technology if you're competent to use it.
Right, and actually, if the advisory board chooses this option, it would actually be new I.
Okay.
I didn't want to re-letter it in case
Right,
it chose
okay.
the first
So it
one.
would be its own.
It's actually its own. They won't be
Okay.
two parts, but yeah.
Yeah, I would like it even better
It will
then.
be, yes, if the advisory board goes with two options, it would be H and I, and then the following subsections would be re-lettered.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you for that
I think it gives
clarification.
the punch then that it needs to make sure that that stands out and it's clear, so.
Do you want to take a vote in terms of which option and what you would like to pursue?
Okay. Would someone like to move one option or the other?
I move to accept these changes, or this addition,
Option 2.
option 2, and propose.
Okay, Dr. Colt moves to accept option 2. Do I hear a second?
This is Tammy Camp. I'll second that.
Seconded by Dr. Camp. All in favor of accepting the wording in option 2?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And we would, just one more motion, that we would propose to recommend publish these in the Texas Register while they'd be on the same. So they'll be two separate items in the Texas Register, but they'll show up in the same Texas Register. But you'd get a recommendation to publish, noting that H1 will be I. That'd be our only change.
Sure. Great. Do I hear a motion to implement option 2 and publish this as quickly as possible in the register?
I so move. Kristen Cole.
Culp, and seconded by?
I'll second Michelle Tejada.
All in favor of publishing this in the Texas Register?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, so this can make that January 12th deadline as well? And
Right, end up in the January 26th Texas Register. Thank you all.
That's really good. And then you need a week off. Are you taking notes over there, Mary?
Wendy's got it. I'm not even worried about it.
No, about the week off part, just having worked through all of these.
We try.
You try, right? That is a lot of work to get these updated. So the next item on our agenda today is recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting. So, Sherry and Cyprian, I actually have one just based on something we just finished. I wondered about what was happening with standards of care and standards of care complaints, and so if I'm wondering, I think other licensees are wondering. So if that's being covered in 16 TAC Chapter 100. Maybe someone could give us a little overview of what that says. I know I can go and read it, but I think it would be good for public record to talk about how standards of care complaints are to be handled. So our compliance folks or whomever's appropriate. We can have that.
Mary Winston, we may possibly, Karen's taking notes, make that a part of the enforcement presentation or a separate item, but it would likely be enforcement.
Thank you, great. Yeah, I couldn't decide which division it would be under, but I think a little overview of what that entails and how those will be handled going forward is great. Other things that we need to cover at our next meeting?
So Wendy Pello, Assistant General Counsel. Both of these rules that you've gone through will be back before you, and along with the public comments that we receive, so to consider that.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so we've timed it such that the comment period will end, and we'll be able to send you those comments, and you'll come back. I think your next meeting is scheduled for March 6th. So.
Perfect.
So both of these will come back, but with the comments.
Great, so we'll get the chance for a final review then based on public comment. Okay. Anybody else have something to put on the agenda? Okay. And then we had previously set March 6th at 1 o'clock, I think, as our next board meeting, correct? And we just need to check and make sure that we'll have a quorum for that meeting, so I know Christine will be checking with everybody. Any other discussion about these issues? Can't believe it, but I could entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion, Tammy Camp, a motion that we adjourn.
Do I hear a
And
second?
Kim Ringer, I second.
Okay. I assume all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Adjourned. Wow.